Hi, everyone. My name is Iman, and this is episode number 4 of PreDental Talk presented by Crack the DAT. Today's episode is our second dental success story, and we are super happy to be joined by Dr. Lindsay Mack. Dr. Mack is a graduate of the University of Washington School of Dentistry and is a practicing dentist in the state of Washington. Welcome, Dr. Mack. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for coming on. So
Yeah.
perhaps we can start at the beginning and, just tell listeners how you got interested in dentistry in the first place.
Well, actually, in the first place, I wasn't really interested in dentistry. My dad is a dentist, and growing up, I was not one of those kids that wanted to do what their parent did. I was very resistant to that. Um, Probably because my mom was so insistent that that's something I should do. And
Mm,
so when I was starting college, I was planning to go to med school. And I was on that track until probably getting kind of close to the end of my senior year when I decided that I was getting really burned out on school and I didn't think I could handle 4 years of med school plus internship and residency. That just sounded really overwhelming to me. So I started exploring other options. And that at that point, my dad kind of took me aside and was like, I always really thought you'd be good at dentistry and I thought you would like it. So I was like, okay, whatever. I don't know what I'm going to do. Might as well check it out a little bit more. So I spent some time with him and some other dentists. And it just really, I was able to see more what an interesting marriage of like science and art that it can be. Dentistry can be very artistic and you're working with your hands. And I really liked that aspect. So that kind of drew me in. But then, to be honest, like the lifestyle was a really huge factor. Medicine oftentimes is you're being on call, you're getting called in on the weekend or after hours. And at that point, I was really wanting to have a family and be able to have a career that could sustain that. And I
mm.
didn't feel like medicine was conducive to that. And dentistry seemed a lot um, more reasonable. My dad, worked pretty regular hours, never worked the weekends, might get called in for emergency once in a while, but definitely not anything like I'd expect medicine to be. So that's really what got me started down that track.
Right. Okay, so that's great. Actually, that's kind of a similar path in me in that when I first got into undergrad, I was also interested in a couple different things, including dentistry and medicine. And like you, I came to that realization a bit later. So I guess in terms of during once you kind of felt you were going that way and you started to you were shadowing your dad, right?
Yeah, that's where I
Yeah.
started.
Yeah, so after that, what were the process like? Did you take a year off to get more dental experience, or were there any other experiences you accumulated to prepare yourself?
Yeah, well, I was in my senior year when I changed my mind about what I wanted to do. So I still had to take a couple classes. I
Mhm,
think in order to apply to UW, I needed microbiology and biochemistry, which I had was not getting in my degree.
mhm,
So I had to take a year off to take those two, and then I did some shadowing. Um, did more shadowing to get some more experience. Honestly, and this is probably something that we were going to talk a little bit more about with the application process, but I really should have gotten a lot more shadowing hours in than I did.
mhm,
I think fortunately, my whoever was reviewing my application, saw that my dad was a dentist, and that probably helped the fact that I didn't have a lot of shadowing hours. Um, so I would definitely recommend, I'm sure everyone already knows that already, but definitely get as much shadowing in as you can, volunteering, as much exposure to dental as you can.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's something that, is a little more difficult this summer,
Yeah,
obviously with the
definitely.
COVID stuff. So I know that there's some people that are a little concerned about that, but it's definitely, you're right. It's definitely a good experience, and hopefully things can pick back up again, and more students can get that opportunity.
Absolutely.
So when you applied to UW, was that because you're from the Northwest? Were you focused on only that region, or did you kind of cast a wider net when you were applying to schools?
I really only applied to 3 schools and only 2 of them seriously. I pretty much knew I wanted to go to UW. I wanted to stay in state. just for tuition reasons. And I grew up in Washington. I love the state. I knew I wanted to practice here.
Hmm.
So that was kind of my primary focus. I did apply to one school in California, and I would have applied to OHSU in Portland, but they required anatomy and physiology, which I did not have and was not going to be able to take within the year that I had off. So I decided to leave that off of my application.
Hmm. It's actually really interesting because I've been reading, like on the dental forums, a lot of students are, advising apply to like a ton of schools, but just so happens that so far the two dentists I've talked to, both of them have only applied to a very limited niche
Yeah,
amount of schools. So
yeah,
they, it goes to show, everyone has their own path and our own process. So
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel like among my classmates, I was in the minority for the number of schools that I applied to. So I felt
Mhm.
a little awkward about that coming into school, but it ended up working out for me, which I'm really grateful for.
Now we are transitioning from the summer to the fall. And so for a lot of students who are applying to dental schools, that means we're entering the interview season. So I was wondering if you had any distinct memories or any, general advice from you going through that process.
Yeah, well, when I was applying for UW, and I believe they've changed this interview process now, so I can't really speak to their current setup. But when I was applying, they brought a group of applicants in, all in together, and they had, I think we got like a tour of the school, and then they had us each interview with three different interviewers throughout the day. Um, just the thing that really stood out to me was just my third interview was with a very intimidating interviewer who
Hmm.
was the one that told me that I was way too short on my shadowing hours, and I was pretty sure I wasn't going to get in because of that. But as we know, that did not happen. Um, as far as recommendations, I'd say just be yourself. Let your passion for dentistry shine through. I it's they want to see who you are and see that you can develop rapport and see that you're passionate about why you want to come to dental school and become a dentist. So I'd say that's just the biggest thing. Don't try to be something that you're not just to try to meet their expectations. They
Hmm.
want to see who you are and make sure you're going to be the right fit.
Hi everyone, the interview with Dr. Mack will be back on in a second, but before that, I thought I should just tell you that by listening to this podcast, you're entitled to 10% off your purchase at crackdat.com. This is a website with full-length practice tests, crash course videos, and plenty of other resources to ace your DAT. So if you head on over to crackdat.com and use the code PODCAST when you check out, you'll be able to save money and work towards your perfect DAT score. Good luck! So once you obviously got into the school and you began in your first couple of days or weeks, was the overwhelming feeling you had was a bit of excitement or a little anxiousness, or was it a mix of both? How are you feeling when you got it there?
Um, Definitely a bit of anxiousness. Honestly, it seems like it's been forever ago now, and I probably blocked out a lot of memories from dental school because it's a challenging 4 years, especially the first 2 years. They just dump a ton of information on you, and it's just like trying to drink out of a fire hydrant. But it was really cool when I started at UW. They did kind of a retreat for the first year class so that we could kind of get to know each other, kind of ease some of the jitters so that we could become friends. And so that was a really nice experience to have. Um, but yeah, just a lot of you really have to learn to prioritize the information that you're getting, just because there is so much. I know for our first year, we were taking anatomy with the med students and histology and then like physiology and pathology and all these things. A lot of the things that we probably learned in undergrad, so it was a bit of a review, which was helpful. But there's just so much information thrown at you at once, and you just try to hold as much as you can and get through the tests.
Right. Yeah, I was actually kind of when you're saying that there's so much wide breadth of information, and a lot of it is stuff building upon what you've previously learned if you have a science background. So in terms of the balance between these classes and like the clinical skills you're developing in a lab, for example, or once you start, so what's is it are the grades like the most important thing, or is it more of you just got to get through it and develop the skills alongside it?
Yeah, it depends if you want to specialize or not. I think if you're planning to go on to endo or oral surgery or pedo, you have to have pretty good grades in order to be competitive for residency programs.
Hmm.
If you know you want to do general, it's really just about kind of getting through it, especially the first year classes. So much of it is just focused on getting you prepared for the boards. Because I feel like after that, you're not going to use that information again. At least I
Hmm.
don't feel like I have.
Hmm.
So yeah, if you know you're just going to do general, then just get through it, learn it for the boards, and then if you don't get the best grades, that's okay. Obviously you still need to pass, but just yeah, don't
All
don't
right.
stress unless you're planning to go into residency.
Awesome. So, throughout your 4 years at dental school, was there anything that surprised you, or perhaps you weren't expecting, something you were expecting to be different, through your time there?
Since I came so late into deciding to do dentistry, I didn't really have a lot of expectations.
Hmm.
So, and especially since I only applied to a couple schools, I hadn't done a lot of research to know, what to expect. And so I came in without many expectations. I think maybe the only thing that surprised me was just the social aspect. I came from a background of going to Christian schools where, you're not allowed to drink or anything like that, and coming to a public university where they're having parties on Friday at the school with a keg. So that was kind of
Hmm.
a culture shock for me a little bit.
Yeah.
But I had gotten a heads up on that, so I wasn't super surprised. But it was just something that, as someone from my background, it was kind of something to adjust to.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because, yeah, my previous interview as well, they were talking about that there's a lot of like the club activities and there's always events, and it seems like you can form these groups in dental school.
Hmm.
By the time you wrapped up your 4 years in dental school, I was wondering if residency was something you were considering, or in terms of getting your hands-on experience through those last 2 years, do you feel that that was enough, or would you recommend a residency when you finish that?
Yeah, so I didn't want to specialize necessarily. It kind of goes back to, the reason I didn't go into medicine is because I didn't want to be in school forever and be on
Hmm.
call and all that stuff.
Right.
So I was just wanting to do general dentistry, and you can do as much or as little as you want within general dentistry. If you want to do root canals all day as a general dentist, you can do that as long as you're doing it to the standard that the endodontist does it. Same thing goes for all the other specialties. Um, I ended up not doing a AGD or a GPR, just because I was done with school. I wanted to get started. I wanted to start paying off my loans.
Hmm.
Um, if I did it again, I would probably do that though. I would take a 1 year and get a residency, not necessarily to work on my hand skills anymore, but just get the confidence and work on, building up my pace. I was really slow when coming out of school. I mean, in dental school, you're seeing two patients a day. You have 3 hours to see each patient.
Hmm.
And when you jump into private practice, you don't have that much time. I was fortunate that the place I started at was very flexible with the amount of time that I needed to do procedures. Um, but it would have just helped me have more confidence. And it takes time to learn how to develop rapport with patients and get comfortable with that. So I think having that residency aspect would be helpful as well. And if you think you might want to be doing implants, which probably that's the way it's going for general dentists, they should know how to place implants. You would definitely want to find a residency that allows that to happen, that teaches you how to place implants to get that so you're ready to do that day one in practice.
Hmm. So obviously you didn't opt for that residency and instead you went into work. So can you describe a little bit about what the job search process was, and how you were able to find your first job?
Yeah, so I didn't have anything lined up right out of school, and it takes a couple months after taking the boards to get your license anyway. It takes, I think I got my license maybe a month and a half or two after graduation. Um, so I didn't have a lot of, it's not a lot I could do as far as doing a working interview or anything like that. But I did do some just in person interviews. I initially was looking in the Seattle area just because that's where we were living at the time, and I didn't know where we were going to end up. Um, and had some kind of failed instances, but then we started broadening our search. I was looking down to where my parents lived because there was the possibility of going to work with my dad because he is still practicing. But my husband couldn't really find work in that area. So we started looking where his parents live in central Washington. And I honestly found an ad on Craigslist of someone looking for an associate dentist. And I applied and they interviewed me and hired me on the spot. And that's just kind of how it happened. We were looking in a place where we could be close to family, and that just happened to work out.
Hmm. Hmm. So I do understand that about a year ago, maybe a bit more than a year ago, you did end up changing practices. So I was wondering
Mhm.
if you could maybe share with the listeners what motivated that change and how you find your new work.
Yeah. Yeah, so my first job was in private practice, and super grateful for them to, take me in as a new grad, let me build up my skills. They were super patient with me as far as the speed thing, and I obviously wasn't producing that much as I first came in. Um, my I think I always knew it, but there was just a big difference in philosophy between me and the owner of the practice. And that caused a lot of stress and anxiety for me. And eventually, I just got to the point where I couldn't handle it anymore. I felt like maybe there was some work happening that shouldn't have been happening. And, while I don't really have any evidence to back that up, it just made me really uncomfortable,
Hmm.
and I decided that I needed to look elsewhere. And so I had initially, when I finished school, had been interested in community health. I had applied to a couple community health clinics um, in the Seattle area, but they were, looking for someone with more experience. So I applied to a couple community health clinics in our area, um, and they brought me in for an interview, and they liked me. I don't think they often get people that have experience applying for their jobs. I think they get a
Hmm.
lot of people right out of school. So I think that helped a lot in securing that position for me.
Right. And so how is it now working in this new community health center?
I really like it a lot. I feel a lot less anxiety about the work that I'm doing. There's, with private practice, you've got to make a profit, which is totally understandable. But there's not as much pressure. You still have to make a profit at our clinic in order for us to run our operations and pay for our staff. But there's no pressure to do certain procedures that are more expensive. The way that we are reimbursed by the state is based on the number of encounters and not based on the procedures that we're doing. So
Hmm.
that takes a lot of the pressure off, that I feel like I can do what the patient actually needs and not something that will help us stay afloat. Um, so I really appreciate that aspect. And as benefits are a huge thing too. When I was in private practice, they were generous enough to pay for my medical insurance. But I had to cover my own malpractice insurance, my own disability insurance, my own life insurance. I didn't get any paid vacation time or any sick time. And that's something that I have now, which is, especially with COVID, that was a huge thing because um, we had to scale back our operations to only seeing emergency patients for about 2 months.
Hmm.
And they started having me and the other dentists rotate off for 2 weeks at a time. And we were able to use vacation time and sick time. And they also provided some emergency pay to help cover our salaries during that time. So I never had any cut in my pay during that whole time, even though I was off. I think I had to take a month off overall. So just been super grateful for that. It's been a huge blessing. Um, and yeah, just that on top of just the lack of stress and I don't feel the pressure to produce like I did before.
Hmm. Actually, I was also going to ask you right after this about how COVID has affected your work. So you already
Yeah.
touched upon it, but so
Hmm.
after those 2 months, did you slowly start opening back up again and seeing more patients, or how did that go?
Yeah. So Governor Inslee had required dental offices to shut down until May 18.
Mhm.
So around that time, we started opening up back up to, we were seeing emergencies. We started seeing adults during that time. We normally only see kids, but we were taking adults just to kind of keep ourselves busy and to help out with the other clinics that were had to be closed. Um, but yeah, then we started, bringing back exams and routine care. They still had us rotating 2 weeks off at a time. Um, but eventually I ran out of my vacation time because I was, have only been there for a little over a year.
Mhm.
So they brought me back full time. They still have the other dentist going off. He'll be off this week and next week,
Mhm.
but he'll be back full time after that. But he still had some vacation time, and so I guess they felt okay having him go off since he would still be getting paid.
Mhm.
But they furloughed most of our staff. In the early days, they had our dental assistants going out to our medical clinics and helping screen temperatures and screen patients that were coming in. But eventually, they just had to furlough everyone.
Mm.
And so either using vacation time or they had to go on unemployment.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because I actually just went to the dentist last week, and yeah, for like cleaning, they didn't use any of the like liquids that produce aerosols. They kind of
Hmm.
just went with the tool. So I mean, have you
Yep.
been doing similar stuff in your practice, I
Yep.
guess? Or, yeah.
Yeah, our only restriction right now is we can't use the Cavitron, which is the ultrasonic scaler that they use to remove calculus and buildup from the teeth.
Mm.
That uses a lot of water, and
Right.
the ultrasonic action creates a lot of aerosol. So we're not supposed to use that, but we're using high speed and slow speed handpieces, which still create aerosol, but they are providing face shields and N95 masks for us. They're requiring all of our patients and their parents to wear masks to come into the office. They're only allowing one guardian at a time, and they're not supposed to bring in other siblings. Um, so it's been a big shift, but I think
Yeah.
we're adjusting.
Yeah, it's definitely a strange time.
Yeah.
So yeah, but so as you look back on your career so far, I was wondering if there's any like big overarching things you maybe learned about yourself or just the field of dentistry in general as you reflect upon everything so far.
Um, yeah, I guess things I learned about myself, and this is not something I really discovered until I started into practice, is just how much of an emotional toll dentistry can take on you. I have become quite a worrier and become rather anxious about procedures and patients and worrying about them. If it was a difficult procedure, I'm hoping they're getting through the night okay. That's decreased a bit as now that I've gone into community dental. We don't have quite the complex cases, especially working with children. I don't feel like we're putting them through as much just because children generally have less complex issues. Um, but I just experienced just within the last couple months an instance that just spiked my anxiety through the roof. I had a little 8-year-old boy who was having a lot of pain in one of his adult teeth,
Mm-hmm.
an adult molar, and I had done a filling on him right before we had to shut everything down, and that tooth was just bothering him the whole couple months that we were down, and they finally came back in. Couldn't really figure out what's going on. The tooth seemed like it was still alive, but he was having a lot of pain still. Finally ended up sending him to the endodontist to have them take a look and see if he needed a root canal.
Mm-hmm.
um, and they came back, said the tooth was dead, and they recommended extracting the tooth. And
Mm-hmm.
the day I found that out, I felt awful. I felt like it was my fault, that this little 8-year-old boy had to have his permanent tooth taken out. I just like, it was a hard day that day too, and just busy and just so much
Mm-hmm.
going on, and I couldn't take it. And um, so that made me question quite a bit if that's something I could handle doing all the time. um, just because I blame myself in cases where things don't go the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I didn't really know about myself going into dentistry. Um, and maybe, if I had known that, I would have chosen a different path. I've recovered from it now. He's going to be fine. He's out of pain now, but it still kind of makes me think like, can I handle doing that for the rest of my life? But you learn from things, and for now, I'm happy with where I'm at. Um, but yeah, something you got to learn to cope with. The emotional stress of taking your patient's health in your hands. I can't imagine what medical providers must feel. I'm really
Right,
glad I
right.
didn't go into medicine, because if I can barely handle a kid having to have a tooth pulled, I can't imagine what it would be like to, have a patient die on you. Um, so that's one of the big things I learned about myself. As far as dentistry, they don't really talk to you a lot about the issues with dental insurance, and running into maybe questionable situations with employers.
Hmm.
um Dental insurance is not the same as medical insurance. They only cover so much a year. With medical insurance, if you have a catastrophic issue and you hit your deductible, and then they're going to take care of the rest. With dentistry, it's more of a benefits thing. So it'd be really awesome to see some sort of reform with dental insurance, um, just to make things more feasible for patients, so that they can have good oral health and be happy with their smiles.
Right. Yeah, I actually because I know in Canada there's the party, the NDP, which is, one of the political parties. They're pushing for universal dental care. I'm wondering, I don't know if in Washington, or if you're aware of any other states that are having any kind of reform, or if you're aware of any of the trends like that, or.
I'm not. um you know Yeah, I'm really not aware of that. I think, a lot of state insurances are pretty good about not having any maxes on their care,
Hmm.
but they don't cover every procedure. Like if you need an implant or a crown, they won't necessarily pay for that unless you can really convince them that it's needed. Um, so it would be awesome to see, some insurance that was more flexible on that. Um, but yeah, even private insurance, it's not very generous. I think most insurances give like $2,000 a year, and
Hmm.
for someone who's got a mouthful of problems, that is not going to cover everything, and
Right,
that can be a real hardship for patients.
right, right. Well, hey, I mean, I really appreciate you coming on and being candid about some things. And I mean, I think dentistry, if you're interested in entering dental school, it's no joke, right? It's 4 years, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars you're investing. So I definitely think it's important to be aware of, it's not all roses sometimes, right? Like there are there
Yeah,
are challenges. So I mean, I really appreciate you coming on it and sharing some of your stories and your path as well, in this.
yeah. And and there are most of the time I would say it's awesome, especially in my
Yeah.
new job. I love working with the kids. I never really thought that I would like that, but
Hmm.
now that I'm in it, it's awesome. The kids are usually really fun, and we can have little conversations together. And they're giggling during the exams, and it's most of the time it's awesome. But
Right.
every once in a while I run into a situation that just keeps me up at night, and having those feelings can make you question what you're doing. So you just got to be prepared for that, and if you're okay with handling that, then that's fine. You got to find ways to cope and to take care of yourself, because if you're struggling with depression and anxiety, you're not going to be doing a good job for your patients. So you got to learn to cope with that.
Right. Well, I know your area, right, where you practice is it's there's a lot of nature around, right? So I
Hmm.
do like hiking and stuff and
Oh
get
yeah, ever
outdoors. It's a
since
way
we
to
moved
cope.
here, gotten really into hiking and backpacking, trying to get into kayaking, so try to spend as much time outside as I can.
Yeah, that does sound lovely. Although today it's 100. I don't know where how it is there, but it's 100 degrees today in Mass. So
Oh wow, yeah,
I
yeah, we're
don't think
getting
I'll
up
be.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey, so let's wrap things up here. Thank you again for coming on. I was just wondering if you had any, last words or any last advice you want to impart on our listeners before we head off.
Just, enjoy the ride. I kind of miss being in school sometimes. Just not having the responsibility. You get all the breaks and all that stuff. It's hard while you're there. It's stressful. But it's a different kind of stress than actually being out in the world. So enjoy the moment, enjoy where you're at. because it goes by in a flash.
Hmm. Awesome. Awesome. Well, Dr. Mack, thank you so much for coming on. The listeners and me also really appreciate your insight, and hopefully we can take away some nuggets as we go along on our journeys. So thank you
Yeah.
again.
Thank you, and good luck to everyone applying, especially this year.
Hey, big thanks to Dr. Mack for joining us in that podcast. And this is just a reminder that if you go to crackdat.com, you can receive 10% off your purchase of a DAT prep package with the code PODCAST. That's PODCAST. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at hi@crackdat.com. That's hi@crackdat.com. Until next time.